like to welcome you all. Thank you very much for attending our session on the Payments File Validation Service from Payments Canada. In this session, what we will do is we will explain what the Payments File Validation Service is, and then we've asked some of the users of the service at BMO, at Bank of Montreal and at TD to speak about their experience with the service. So great, big thanks to Leisa and Kate for agreeing to speak with us. So what we'll do is explain the service, talk about it, and then we'll open up to a question and answer session. So I'll try and do that quite early so that you get an opportunity actually to ask questions from the two big users of the service, Leisa and Kate. So the first thing I want to do actually is introduce the speakers. So I am Tricia Balfe. I'm Head of Services at XMLdation, and we provide the platform on which the Payments File Validation Service is built. On the far left, we have Brenda Wagle. Brenda Wagle is the product owner for the PFVS and a senior business analyst at Payments Canada. So a good contact point for the service. Then we have Kate Risch Choi. She's senior product manager in Treasury and Payment Solutions at BMO Financial Group and is based in Chicago rather than in Toronto. And finally, we have Leisa Millier, Vice President in Global Transaction Banking at TD. So I think Leisa and Kate have been really instrumental in driving a lot of the work to implement the BMO and TD file formats onto the Payments File Validation Service. I'm going to sit down now and I'm going to, from now on, just start to ask questions and let the other guys talk. So first of all, so is my mic working? Yeah. Yep. So first of all, Brenda, can I ask you to describe the Payments File Validation Service and explain why Payments Canada is interested in such a service in Canada?
Sure. Well, many of you who are here today are familiar with my colleague, Frank Keller, who joined us a couple of minutes ago. Hey, Frank. So a few years ago, Frank was at an industry event, much like this one, and he happened to be seated with Leisa. And the two of them together watched a presentation about a solution that had been incredibly useful to financial institutions in Europe during their transition to ISO 20022. At the end of the presentation, Leisa sat back and said, "Whew, I could use something like that." Now, those of you who know Frank can picture what happened next. Out came the napkin, out came the pen. How would you use it? What would it do for you? What's the value? So an idea was born. And we, shortly after, at Payments Canada, started conversations with XMLdation, who was the provider of this solution. And the goal of these conversations was to determine whether this solution could be tailored to meet the needs of the Canadian marketplace. As it turns out, it could, and here we are today. So, using the expertise of payments experts like Leisa and Kate at our member financial institutions, working closely with the incredibly responsive and knowledgeable team at XMLdation, and through the work of a crack team at Payments Canada, who we all united under this common purpose to make life easier for our respective customers, we came up with the Payments File Validation Service. So what does the service actually do? The PFVS is essentially a turnkey solution for financial institutions and their corporate clients to validate test payment data. So by logging into the service, a user can validate test payment data against the overarching requirements of a standard, ISO 20022, and also against the proprietary business requirements of a specific financial institution. The service also simulates a payment response file from that institution to their corporate client, which allows the client to validate whether their own systems can ingest and interpret the information in that response file correctly. So in practical terms, what does this mean? It means that a financial institution that chooses to subscribe to the service and/or the corporate clients of that institution can go from initial conversations to user acceptance testing in a fraction of the time and with a fraction of the effort that it previously used to take. Now, we at Payments Canada are very proud of the service that we've partnered with XMLdation to create. And we're tremendously proud that TD and BMO have chosen to subscribe. And we're also in conversations with a number of other financial institutions who are interested in subscribing to the service. And as Tricia mentioned, I'm happy to answer any questions about it. But the session today is really so that you can hear from Leisa and from Kate about how they're using the service to optimize their onboarding process and the value that they're seeing in it for both the financial institution and their customers as we start this huge industry-wide migration to ISO 20022. So Tricia, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you very much, Brenda. Great stuff. So let's get started talking to Kate and Leisa. So Kate, you joined, actually when we worked with Payments Canada initially, there was a pilot project, and BMO joined after that point. So you weren't involved at the outset. What was it that drove BMO? What did BMO see was important about the payments file validation service?
So BMO had been evaluating this type of solution, and when it came forward with Payments Canada that it might be an industry full Canada solution, then that was very important because we see ISO as strategically important, and we want to offer tools to our companies to make it easier to follow us on that path to adoption. So it saves a lot of time internally and for our customers to be able to run it past all of those rules. So you have the ISO schema validation as well as all of the BMO rules, because as everyone in this room knows, none of the clearing systems have made changes over to ISO yet. So there's a translation layer that's built in. Even when a corporate sends in an ISO file, it gets translated to something else, such as a CPA format, a NACHA file format, a SWIFT format, so that it can actually enact the payment. So along the way, lots of different things happen, and we don't want all of our corporate customers to have to know what all of the rules are in all of the legacy formats or in the back offices. So the payments file validation service really makes it clear what they have to do to get to a successful file, even though all of the legacy things are happening in the background. Yeah.
Great. And Leisa, you were involved right from the outset. In fact, I mean, I think you were part of the inspiration for Payments Canada getting involved with building the PFVS. And what was important for TD? Why did you see that this type of service was important for TD?
We started the journey almost 10 years ago when we were approached by our multinational clients in Europe who had just gone through their modernization program as a result of SEPA. They came in, they were looking for a Canadian bank to partner with in order to facilitate their Canadian dollar corridor. They came into the bank, they asked whether or not we would be able to support it. At that time, the answer was no. They told us the train is moving, you need to make a quick decision on if you want to get on the train or not. So it was very supportive by our team and our senior management team to move forward. So we built the data transformation process into, just like Kay said, into our legacy platforms. So we started 10 years ago. Multinationals were really experienced. It was a pleasure working with them. They understood the formats already. They understood the legacy challenges that Canada was facing. The experience was great. You're dealing with a few clients coming in at the time. We would be doing 1 a year, 2 a year, and then you start ramping up. And I would say it's probably been 5 years where we started to see a little bit of a shift. And then if I fast forward to today, the ramp up migrating to ISO right now is putting pressure on our internal teams to be able to support this without having tools. Our clients, our Canadian clients, the smaller corporates, they're not as experienced, so understanding a new format, we've been doing EDI and EFT for ever. So all of a sudden, having to understand a new structure has been a challenge for a lot of people. If I think back to the conversation I had with Frank at NACHA, I think I had just finished a corporate client where I had just tested 165 test files. That's manually. So myself
I've been
as-
there, that's why I'm laughing.
I know. So that's my involvement to oversee and find out what's wrong with their files and ticking back. It's the IT resources that are constantly bringing in more files, amending, error reports, implementation managers going, I don't understand. It was a challenge. And when at the NAJA conference, I said to Frank, I can't take this anymore. So it's something that I thought at the time that we needed to address in order to provide a better client experience and in order to start preparing our own internal resources on what this new structure is going to look like going forward, because the train is moving and it's not going to stop. So.
I agree. It's all about scalability, taking a process that was built and then building onto that process, adding technology and resources and tools for internals and for companies as more and more companies choose ISO over everything else, to be able to meet that need, right? In a quick way, taking out the manual processes our companies are automating, we should automate too, right? So this is a way to automate that validation process with the tool.
Great, that's fantastic explanation of, I guess, the problems that you were encountering. And now you've moved, Kate. You've been using the service for quite some time, and you have opened the service to clients.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about your experience as you provide this self-service option to your clients?
Sure. Very good response so far. So we were doing exactly what Leisa was describing prior to. It was manual, validating the client file against an Excel-based, MIG document. And then we had the internal launch of the PFVS. And then I had access to the tool. And at that point, I could take the client files and start refining the rules. So we maybe start with a basic schema, the known variables that might be derived because of the legacy platforms underneath. And then you start testing the files and building the use cases and making the rules better and better. And so we're in that internal launch phase for probably about 6 months. We launched client-facing in January of this year, and our clients love the service, right? So it's such a sense of pride and empowerment when they get to that passing file. So they can see right in real time, does it pass all of the rules? What do I need to change? What are the tags that might be out of place? Is there a schema error? Is there a typo? Right? Because there's so many of those manual file build steps that are small errors. They're not meaty content discussions. They're really, you typed a tag with a capital letter or a lowercase letter, or it's in the wrong order. So the PFVS catches all of those errors instead of emailing back and forth, which is very time consuming, particularly when you're talking about clients who sit all over the world. We have teams that we work with in Europe, in Asia. We've launched also cross-border, which is great. So anyone who banks with BMO and they want to originate ISO from Canada or from US-based accounts, it's all a single experience, which is really great that we're able to use the tool on both sides of the border. So it is a more consistent experience for our companies, because they don't operate in only one place, right? Like they start with one side of the border and then they do the other side a few months later sometimes, or perhaps they want to do everything all at once and you just select the location, the pay type that you want to validate against, and you can go from there.
Something too, Kate, that we've done together is XMLdation and Payments Canada and financial institutions that choose to subscribe work really closely together to refine those business rules and to build errors or notifications or information into the interface that the client sees. So they don't need to stop and figure out, what was it that I did wrong and what do I need to fix? We have experts like Kate and Leisa who share that information with us, and then XMLdation takes it and builds it right into the client interface. So that customer can edit their files in near real time and validate in seconds whether the correction that they made has been effective.
Right, and that's a very powerful tool. And the way we've refined those rules is if I start seeing certain themes, like customers that use SAP they keep making this mistake. Well, maybe I need to build in a rule that addresses that so I don't have to have that same conversation with multiple companies. So that's a good sort of way to address the common errors and even the less common errors that I didn't necessarily think about during the internal launch until you really start putting those client files through the tool and see, how are people mapping the data? Because once you get the file structure, then how do you map the data into the file structure? And so now that we've launched for a number of months, we're starting to see, well, people are concatenating address data. Maybe we need a rule about concatenation of address data, right? And you can keep making it better and better, so the clients have to come back to the bank with questions less and less frequently.
So I think that XMLdation is a great platform, but I also think that when you have experts like Kate and Leisa who take the care, pay attention and understand what clients are having difficulties with and pass that information on to us, it makes the service extra good. So I think you've done a great work. I think you also mentioned, Kate, that when your first few clients that were using the service wanted to go for margarita with you.
Oh, yes.
They were so pleased.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, clients are very excited. I get responses. They send me the passing file. So I have the client send me the passing file, and I do a once-over to make sure that they're good prior to UAT approval. And when I give them UAT approval, I get responses like, Yahoo! Or I get responses like, let's go for a drink, it's time for margaritas. Like our clients are so excited that they know that they're ready to go and move on to the next step.
So it's a great customer experience.
It is.
And Leisa, you have launched it with clients as well, and I think in your case you have some statistics around the improvements or how fast clients can move through the testing phase.
If you think about manual processing and a client, and this is in the old world, a client sending in a file through the communication protocol takes 4 to 6 weeks to set it up. Once they get the door to come into the bank to start testing, their first test file will come through. It will not work. They will go away. The response may go back in 24 or 48 hours, depending upon how bad the file was. That time lapse of having to wait the 4 to 6 weeks and then have the ability to start testing to see where your issues are, we're now able to provide them with that self-service tool that I can go away and have the infrastructure built. They can have a login ID to go into the sandbox. They can start playing. And we rolled out our first client a couple of months ago. And I was just ecstatic. They came in, they had their login ID. The next day they went in, logged in. I look at the statistics and I see that they have 5 files. First one failed, second one, third, fourth, fifth, they get the little green check mark, everything is good. And I looked to draw the statistics, and they did the 5 files in 20 minutes, and each file took 5.1 seconds. And I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, like, why we couldn't have done this before? It would have been great. But right now, the opportunity to roll this out bank-wide, we're hitting it mid-summer. We're really excited.
And Kate, it's not only about file validations as well, right? That the clients use it for other purposes as well. Can you just describe a little bit about that?
Sure. So the typical path that a client will take through the PFVS is they'll start working with example files, whether from the user guide or there are example files built right into the tool that you can select. And then you select your validation type, and you can start seeing right away what the tool looks like. Can you edit it in real time? What if I break something? Then what happens? So clients can use the example files that we populated. By the way, they're BMO samples in the tool, and to see what would happen, to get experience with the tool. And then when a company is working in their development environment is when they will browse for a file, upload it, do the validations, and then they're already comfortable with the tool because of the example files. And so they know what to do, right? They know how to do the PDF extract. They know how to download a file. Then after they're done with the validations, everything passes, then you can take that passing file and move on to the simulations tab. And there you can upload your passing file with the client's test data and get a Pay No 2 response file or returns and rejects reporting or even human readable reports. So there's lots of response files that we've built back in, which is great for when companies want to write parsing rules. So they can use data that they have populated to map it back. And it's easier to across payments languages when you can map the input to the output. So the DEFR reports for EFT returns and rejects reporting are still in a CPA format. NACHA returns and rejects reporting is in NACHA format. So that can be very difficult for originators who are sending an ISO. They still have to deal with non-ISO file formats for some pieces of their puzzle. And the simulation tool will better prepare them with what to expect before actually having to go live or working with some sort of a mock-up or a static sample that doesn't contain their data. So once you get through the simulation function, then the next part is the differences tool. This is good for regression testing or for when companies move from their development environment to their test environment. You can take two similar reports. The tool will put them side by side and highlight anything that's different. So you can confirm very quickly if the file from dev and the file from test are the same, or if something changed, when they did that copy over of the code to the new environment. So that's useful as well. And as we go toward system-wide migrations, that differences tool comes in handy for migration purposes as well, because then it's very clear what the before is and what the after is, and do they match. So that'd be the typical path.
Great. So, yeah,
So
Brenda,
Kate
you wanna...
is talking about all the different payment file types and how things can get confusing. And one of the things that we really admire about what XMLdation does for financial institutions that choose to subscribe to our service is the XMLdation platform allows an administrator at a financial institution to control what is visible on a per client basis. So if you have a customer who's testing one or two payment file types, they don't have to look at a list of 20 and decide from those 20 which one might be useful and how they're going to use it. Right. You can actually customize the view of your customer so that they can see just what they need to see just when they need to see it. So I think it's going to help with the confusion.
Right, and just one thing on the administration, it takes about a minute to set up a user, so it's really fast. It's not a time-consuming activity to do that admin function, and yes, you just click off exactly what they need. So, but we have many clients who are implementing everything, right,
Yes.
cross-border, so they have lots of things to choose from. But we've also built in like the mixed pay type. So if you have a mixed pay file, you just choose that one.
So
Makes it
essentially,
simpler.
like what we've done together is built a house. We've built a strong, secure house. The foundation's good, the roof is up to code, the lights turn on and off, the plumbing works. And then the financial institutions who choose to subscribe to the service, simply, it's a turnkey solution and they decide how to furnish their room within that house. So you get your own environment, you decide which validation types you want your customers and your financial institution people to be able to see. Which simulations will be most helpful to your client. And then Tricia and I, the XMLdation team, the Payments Canada team, we work together to furnish that room according to your liking.
This is really easy for me, letting them do all the talking. I'd like actually to throw it open to the floor now. So we have 5 minutes left, and I think it would be great if people have questions. So I have more things that I can ask, but anybody in the audience want to ask a question? Yeah.
This sounds great for batch files, but with all the talk about real-time payments, is there a thought to do validation on real-time messages in the response to that?
So on XMLdation side, absolutely. We do provide a solution for real-time testing as well. I think even with batch testing, depending on the expertise of the client, an API-based testing can be useful. But for sure, with real-time, it's not clear yet how the real-time are going to, if the services are being made available to bank clients. But we do have a solution for testing, API-based testing.
What the PFVS is doing is really illustrating the benefit across the industry of having a solution like this in place. So as things progress and as we move forward, we'll be exploring other business opportunities and how we can leverage this great relationship to help the industry move forward.
One thing on that topic, while it's not a real-time payment in the real-time rail sense, we have built-in Zelle payments to the PFVS as a available pay type. So many corporates still want to originate that in a batch process, even though they do go through individually for the way they settle in more of a real-time sense. So even if they settle individually or as real-time, there will likely still be a corporate need for a batch process in a P&O1 type of a file, even for real-time payments, which it could easily accommodate.
Any other questions? So I have another question. I think, Kate, you mentioned before about how the PFVS and these testing tools helped to make the conversation with clients around using a standard format at BMO. It helps that conversation because clearly for banks, it's beneficial if your clients all use a standard format of the file.
Yeah. So when we talk to someone who's interested in using ISO. ISO is all about standardization, right? So we can also tell them that if you use the standard, it's already built. You know what your testing is going to look like. You can use the tool. If you want to do something custom, it's not in PFVS, right? So you lose that testing mechanism if you do something custom. So that has been actually a very good motivator for companies who might be doing something custom with another bank or in another jurisdiction. To actually move toward the standard because they say, oh, you know what, I can do this very quickly, I can do it ahead of the implementation project, I don't need any additional resources, so it helps facilitate that conversation. And especially as we talk about removing the legacy from the background, it's important that we know what our companies are doing, right? So the more companies that are using a standard process and using the required tags in the way that they should be, the less likelihood of disruption over time as all of those pay types move toward the target state.
Yeah, so you're reducing, there could be a huge maintenance and build burden later if you have
If you do
standardized.
something custom, absolutely, yes.
One other thing, I think both TD and BMO are using PFVS for non-ISO as well. So how is that?
So we use it for, we're using it for a positive pay migration as an internal tool. So that is non-ISO. It is a proprietary flat file format. And it works really well. So our migration team is in there regularly testing. It does the before and after checks to see, did they populate the changed data in the correct way? And it's working very smoothly. So you can also use the PFVS for sort of a short-term project, such as a migration, and it doesn't have to be ISO-based. We also have Nacha built-in, EFT built-in as well. So the intention would be anything client-generated should have this self-serve testing portal available over time.
And I think, Leisa, I was speaking with one of your colleagues at TD, and we were talking about the support for EFT 1464 in the tool for TD. And her comment was, oh yes, Leisa got the person who has all the knowledge in the bank in her head about EFT 1464. So what's been put into PFVS is really right. And it seems to me that that's really valuable in terms of capturing the knowledge of an organization. Some of this knowledge is in the heads of a small group of people.
We've taken it, we've identified in other areas, so we're also responsible for corporates on SWIFT. And some of the challenges that we have when we're onboarding corporate clients to the SWIFT infrastructure is that they have a need to test. And our SWIFT PAT environments are not open to corporate clients. We have to schedule test windows. We have to make sure that test data, their account information, is in a test database. It's challenging, and corporates don't want to wait for that configuration, and they don't want to wait to compete with projects that are going on in our SWIFT environment. So we took the opportunity to build the business rules for the Swift MT 101, and we've implemented that too. So it's giving the client a standalone test tool to be able to go in with their 101s and see what the business rules and the routing rules that TD uses when they're doing their Swift payments. So that's been really good.
So I think our time is up, but does anybody have a burning question before we finish? So what I'd say, if anybody wants to come and talk to us, actually after this session, the four of us will be at the Payments Canada booth. So if anybody wants to come and talk to BMO and TD, to Kate and Leisa, who have all this expertise and experience, or to Brenda, who is the product owner at Payments Canada, about the service, you're very welcome to join us down there. And of course, you're welcome to come and visit XMLdation at the XMLdation booth as well, and speak about the file validation service and our other solutions. And one last thing, I want to thank the audience, and especially thank Brenda, Kate and Leisa for participating in this session. Thank you very much.
Thanks, ladies, for being here. I really appreciate it.